Hey Spuddies, PotatoMcWhiskey here, and welcome to my June update city-states tier list, where we're going to go through every single city-state in the game, talk about their bonuses, how good they are, when they're good, why they're good, and which civs they have extra synergy with. Now, this is not going to be a comprehensive list. I do want to make sure that you guys realize there are going to be things that I miss. Go ahead and leave me a comment in the video if you want to, fill me in on something that I missed out on. Also, you can check me out at twitch.tv/PotatoMcWhiskey if you want to see me make this live. So let's just get into it. Right. Starting off with, we're going to talk about cultural city-states, industrial city-states, militaristic city-states, religious city-states, scientific city-states, and trade city-states as categories. And then we'll kind of break down into the subcategories of which city-states inside those categories are good. So if we take a moment to look at cultural city-states, it's pretty obvious that these are really, really good sort of as a category for a cultural, any sort of tourism game where you're going to be building a lot of cultural culture districts, theater squares, all that sort of stuff. But they are quite useful for some of the other ones. For example, if you're going for a science victory, it sometimes is worth it to build a few theater squares in order to get your culture up so that you can get your hands on some of those late game policy cards in order to boost how fast you can get through the tech tree in order to win the game. In terms of industrial city-states, I think these are sort of the overall weakest. Whereas I would consider like cultural and scientific like some of the strongest. Industrial would be one of the weakest as a category. They're just not that useful. Typically, the extra production early in your capital isn't super useful. You're not usually going to be building a lot of industrial zones, with the exception of if you're going for a diplomatic victory so that you can do the carbon recapture project. So generally speaking, I would think of industrial zones as just a little bit weaker than other city-states as a category, but they're still reasonable. Militaristic city-states are kind of a weird one. They're really, really super strong in the early game if you can get a quick envoy with them. But they're not that super great in the mid to late game unless you're going for a militaristic victory. I forgot to hide my buttons. With regards to religious city-states, they are a little bit of a one-trick pony. They're not too great for sort of in general case use. They are extremely good at religious victories. They can kind of help you out in a tourism victory if you're building a few holy sites early in the game to transition into either a science or culture victory. They can be useful. And in certain situations in a domination victory, where you go for an early religion, you can maybe do some mid-game faith purchasing. They can find use there. It's not really that amazing. It's just kind of okay. It's reasonable. It's not crazy. Scientific city-states, kind of like cultural city-states, these are some of the best in the game. The faster you unlock tech, the better your units, the better the buildings. The faster you get buildings, the earlier you can build them. And you just start to snowball from there. These are really, really, really great city-states. And I would say that it would be somewhat like scientific and cultural city-states are the best in general. Militaristic city-states are best, say, in the first 50 turns if you can get an envoy with them. And then sort of trade would occupy the point between. Trade would be just underneath militaristic city-states. They give you a lot of gold early. They can get you a lot of gold, and you're going to want to build a lot of commercial hubs and anyway in most of your games. So you tend to get a lot of gold from them, even if their bonuses aren't actually very good. You do end up with quite a bit of gold, especially if you're doing a coastal build. Trade city-states can give you a lot of gold there, especially with the updates to how they give you gold. So trade would be next, and then it would be religious city-states, and then at the very bottom would be industrial city-states. So that's sort of the general ranking. I'm going to talk about when you start a game. There's a point in the game where when you meet a city-state, you'll get the very first envoy with them straight off the bat when you meet that city-state. And you'll get their one envoy bonus from that moment onwards. And this can be a game-changing bonus. So, for example, the militaristic city-state, when you get the one envoy bonus, you get +2 production in your capital when you're building units. Now, typically, when you're in the early game, you're basically only building units, right? You're building scouts, you're building slingers, you're building warriors, you're building builders, and you're building settlers. And yes, this production in the capital does not only apply to military units, it applies to civilian units like builders, like military engineers, and like settlers. So if you like, that's why the militaristic city-state here, you can see this category here, the one envoy category, militaristic city-states get a 5 out of 5. They are the best to find early because they let you build settlers faster, they let you build your army faster, they just let you do everything in the early game faster. Now, the tier down from that for the start of game first envoy, first meeting city-state are cultural city-states and scientific city-states. These are a little bit weaker because there is a downside to getting them. The faster you get through the tech tree is obviously the better, but there is a downside in that all of the districts that you plan to build will become more expensive as a consequence of advancing through the tech tree. It's probably a mechanic that maybe not everyone is fully aware of, but basically the price of building a district is based on how advanced you are in technology and culture. And so there can be a little bit of a downside to going for these, whereas just getting the extra production from militaristic city-state is just always good. And then the next step down are the religious and trade city-states for your first envoy. If you can meet these guys early, the extra 2 faith that you get from religious city-states is quite nice. It can help you get a pantheon early. If you don't have a way to generate faith early, it also means you don't have to plug in God King, which means extra production without having, so that's nice. If you find a religious city-state early, it means you don't have to sacrifice quite as much to get a pantheon, and you'll actually get a pantheon quicker anyway. If you manage to find a trade city-state, what that can mean is you can often buy better tiles more consistently. You can make sure you're sending delegations. You might even be able to buy stuff off the AI. You might even be able to purchase like a builder a few turns earlier, get some tiles online, all that sort of stuff. These are great things that you can use to your advantage. The worst one to meet early, in my opinion, is the industrial city-state. That's why it has a score 2 out of 5. A 2, the only reason it doesn't get a 1 is because a 1 is just not meeting a city-state, right? Whereas this is just slightly better than not meeting a city-state at all. Typically, you're not going to be building buildings in your capital early. You're going to be building settlers and units of varying kinds. This does have some niche cases if you're playing on lower difficulties, but where you might rush like Stonehenge or something. But typically, we're going to be playing on a high difficulty game where, like Deity, where we're not really going to have an opportunity to rush certain early wonders, and we need to get our settlers out. So we're not going to be taking advantage of this, because building granaries and monuments early in your capital, it's nice to do, but I don't think it's really worth it to try to take advantage of this bonus. It doesn't make a big difference for your empire. Now, where it does shine is after you're done settling and you transition into building your districts and stuff like that, like holy sites. It could be nice for building up your holy sites and stuff early. Don't get me wrong, if you're going for an early religion build, but I think it's just not good enough and doesn't apply to enough stuff that you're going to be doing in the early game in your capital. Because remember, this bonus only applies to your capital. So it's really not that good. So again, just to reiterate, when you are in the early game and you're meeting city-states, the best ones to meet are militaristic, scientific, and cultural. Those are the ones you want to meet early, and if you get a free envoy with them, fantastic. Otherwise, you might want to try to meet trade and religious. If you meet those early, great. If you meet an industrial city-state, cry yourself to sleep because you just got robbed. So that is the early city-state review. So what we're going to go do now is go through the list one by one in each of the categories and talk about them individually, why they're strong, when they're strong, or why they're weak and when they're weak, and any special synergies that they have. Again, I am going to miss some of the synergies in here. This is like 4 hours of work. I didn't. This is 4 hours of work. So it's not going to be comprehensive. Obviously, I've played thousands of hours of the game, right? So, but this is not a complete and comprehensive thing. It's going to be an evolving, living document that you guys give me feedback down in the comments or whatever, and I will make sure to update this as we go forward. So, to start off, we'll start alphabetically in the cultural city-states. We've got Antananarivo. I do apologize for butchering this. I'm not very good. I'm not very good at all at pronouncing the city-state names. The +2 culture, +2% culture for each great person earned up to 30%. This was actually recently nerfed in the June update patch. This used to stack infinitely, and it was absolutely bonkers, like legitimately insane. If I wasn't, even if I was grading like on a scale of 1 to 5 for these, it would have gotten a 6 because it was just insane. This is such a good one. The important thing to note here is that this is a post multiplier. Okay, so what does that mean? So let's say you have +3 amenities in your capital city and you're earning 100 base culture. The +3 positive amenities are going to give you a 10% bonus, right? So that means you'll go up to 110 culture. Then this bonus will apply, and say you've earned 5 great people. So instead of getting the 10% off of the base, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if they've changed this, but this was how it worked before. So I could be wrong about this. I will double check this, but I'm pretty sure you actually get, let's say you have a 10% multiplier, you'll actually get 11 culture rather than 10. I haven't double checked this with the patch, but that was how it used to work. I should have probably double checked that, but that's how it used to work. So it's a little bit stronger than it looks like on paper because it's actually multiplying off your multipliers. If you have any culture multipliers, like for example, Pengala's 15% multiplier in your capital, and you have a capital that generates a lot of culture, this can potentially be, if you have a 15% multiplier, it's actually a 16.5% multiplier if you're getting a 10% from this. So it's pretty strong. It's really, really good. It helps you just get a lot of culture. And if you're going for a cultural game, you're going to be earning a lot of great people anyway. You're going to be getting a lot of great writers, artists, and musicians, and then potentially even great merchants and great scientists and great engineers, depending on how you're trying to get through the game as well. So overall, I would rate this as really good. It's going to get you through the cultural tech tree really, really fast. I think it really does shine in the cultural victory, the science victory, and the diplomacy victory. These are all color-coded. If you're wondering, I'll try to highlight this so you can see it. In the science victory, it's nice because if you can get through the civic tree really, really fast in a science victory, you can end up picking up some of the really late game power cards that let you generate a lot of science, which will let you get through the tech tree faster, which will let you win the game faster. Similarly for culture, there's a lot of really nice late game culture, civics and policy cards that are really, really good for winning a culture victory. So being able to advance through that faster is really, really nice, especially since this is a scaling bonus and not just a flat bonus. And then for diplomacy, similar sorts of things. There's important late game cards and policies for a diplomacy victory. In particular, the one that lets you do carbon recapture, I believe, is like a future technology one. That one's really, really good for going for a diplomacy victory because every time you complete that project, you get some diplomacy points. For religion and domination, this isn't super useful. It's not really going to help you win the game, but it's not worthless. It's still an okay city-state to try and get suzerainty of. You're just not going to get most of the value. It's still nice. Next, we are going to talk about Kumasi. Kumasi's bonus is that trade routes to city-states provide +2 culture and +1 gold for every specialty district in the origin city. So what that means is if in your capital city, in this example, you have built a campus, a theater square, and a commercial hub, and you trade with a city-state, you will get this bonus multiplied by 3. You will get 6 culture and 3 gold. That's a pretty solid bonus for almost every victory except for culture victories for one very specific and particular reason. In culture victories, you don't want to trade with city-states. You want to trade with other players so that you get the the extra tourism pressure modifier from trading with another player. So that's the only reason this isn't a very good effect for culture victories. It's really good for every other type, like science, domination, and diplomatic victory types. It's really, really good. It's even kind of applicable to religion games. Now, don't get me wrong. You can still use this in a culture game, but don't try to, it's not really going to interact with your win condition a whole lot. if you're playing a cultural game. It's a solid 4 out of 5 city-state suzerainty bonus. This is the ranking. This is just the fun ranking. These are really, really fun to use. They're both 5s, but the actual ranking is a 4 out of 5. It's a solid, really, really good city-state bonus. Also, I forgot to mention, it has some synergies with the Congo, Inca, and Germany, who tend to have a few more districts than other players in their cities because they have larger populations or extra district slots. So in general, if you're playing as these civs, you're going to get a little bit more value out of them. For Antananarivo, I forgot to mention that it has a strong combo with Bologna, which is a city-state down here that gives you extra great people points. We'll talk about that later. And any civ that has extra great people generation, like Russia, like the Congo, are going to get extra value out of Antananarivo. I don't think it's really that big of an extra value, but it's there, it's measurable, and it's okay. It's good. Next, we have our first joke city-state. We have Mohenjo-Daro. Okay, it's still good because it's a cultural city-state and it gives you the envoy bonuses up here, but cities have full housing from water as if they were next to a river. First of all, this is not a very fun bonus. This bonus essentially relies on you playing badly. That's what this bonus requires. In order to take advantage of this, you either have to be playing badly and not settling on fresh water, or have been already in a really disadvantageous position without any fresh water to settle. That, in my mind, makes this a very, 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 very weak bonus. It makes it not so useful. It's not going to help your win condition. It's not super useful because A, you should be able to navigate your way around the inability to find fresh water. B, there are other solutions for not having fresh water, such as aqueducts. This one is quite nice in that it doesn't require you to invest any production. However, it's a little bit of a precarious bonus to invest into, because in one of my recent games, I was taking advantage of this, and I actually settled specifically to take advantage of this, and then another AI just straight up killed Mohenjo-Daro, and then none of my cities had housing. So, yeah, I just don't think this is very good. I think for civs with a coastal bias and, say, some sort of naval map where there's not a whole lot of rivers and there's plenty of coastal settles, this can be really good, because on coastal maps, city-states tend to live a little bit longer, and there tends to be more opportunities to actually take advantage of the bonus. But I still think this is like a 1 out of 5. This is worst in the category. This is easily the worst city-state, cultural city-state in the category. It's still good because it's a cultural city-state. You're going to want to take advantage of it if you can, but just don't, if you've got another choice, go for that one first. Next, we've got Nan Madol. Now, Nan Madol gives you +2 culture to all districts on or next to coast or lake tiles. So what does that mean? That includes city centers, aqueducts, canals, everything. Any district that is either placed adjacent to coast, that is beside water, or in coast, i.e. harbors, street carnivals, that sort of thing, will get +2 culture. This is an exceptionally powerful bonus that really, really shines in the early mid-game on any sort of naval map. It's equal on par. It's a 5 out of 5 on the power level rating, in my opinion. It's equal on par with Antananarivo. However, Antananarivo is better in the late game, in my opinion, and Nan Madol is better in the early game, in my opinion. So that would be the sort of difference I would draw between those two. It's still pretty damn good across most victory types, with the exception of religious victory types where culture isn't very important. It still can be useful, don't get me wrong, but it's far more useful for things like science, culture, and diplomacy. It does have extra synergy for Australia and Indonesia because they tend, I think they have they're a couple of the civs with a coastal bias, and they tend to build districts on the coast anyway because they get extra bonuses for being coastal. I think Indonesia gets some minor adjacency from water, and I think Australia gets things from high appeal, so they're going to want to place coastally because coastal tends to have high appeal. And I think it also has some very, very minor synergy with civs like Phoenicia and England, who might build their unique districts on the water for the purpose of taking advantage of this bonus, or just getting a little bit more out of this. So it's a really, really good, really solid top two out of the cultural city-states. I'd say it's tied for first place with Antananarivo. It's really, really good, really, really good, really, really, really good. And you, even if you aren't trying to take advantage of this, you're going to just passively, through the process of playing the game, take advantage of the fact that Nan Madol is just giving you a ton of culture. Then we've also got the Rapa Nui. I have no idea how to say this. And their bonus is the Moai Unique Tile Improvement. The Moai Unique Tile Improvements give you +1 culture and +1 culture for every 2 adjacent Moai, and +2 culture if it is on or adjacent to volcanic soil, and +1 culture if it is adjacent to coast or lake, and they can generate tourism at conservation. So the Moai is very, very good, but it has one really big drawback, and that is it cannot be placed adjacent to woods or rainforest. Now, when does the Moai shine? And when is its drawback? I think the Moai, I have no idea how to say it. The Moai, Jesus Christ, I have no idea how to pronounce this. The Rapa Nui's unique tile improvement really shines in a culture game where you haven't gone for an early religion and you don't have the faith generation in order to make national parks, because this cannot be built adjacent to forests. And if you have the faith generation for making national parks, you're going to want to have forests everywhere in order to make as many national parks as possible. It is also a really great way to convert an area of your empire that might not be suited for national parks into an area that can still generate a lot of tourism for you. So in that case, it's really good for a culture/tourism victory. However, it's not so great for any other victory type. It doesn't really do a whole lot. It's a very small amount of culture. You're mostly building this for the tourism, and if you're building it for the tourism, you basically want to pick an area of your empire and practically fill every possible tile with this tile improvement. Now, it can help you gain gain culture and tourism in games where you would otherwise struggle to get culture. So, for example, if you're in, say, a science game and you don't really have a way to get theatre squares up, throwing down a few Moais are quite good. So I would rate that 3 out of 5. It's a decent, solid Suzerain effect. It doesn't blow me out of the water, but it's not terrible either. It's just pretty decent. Next, we've got Vilnius, whose bonus is for the highest active alliance level. All of your theater squares receive plus 50% adjacency bonus. And that's there's 3 levels to an alliance, so that goes 50%, 100%, and 150%. This is, in my opinion, one of the weaker cultural city-state suzerain bonuses. It's mainly for one reason, and that one reason is the fact that it's actually quite hard to get adjacency effects on theater squares. There's not often when you're playing on Deity are you able to reliably get a certain amount of wonders and then have them easily placed to put your theater squares around for the extra adjacency. So this one can be a little bit harder to take advantage of, even though it is on paper really powerful. It's a really powerful effect. It can just be a little bit difficult to take advantage of. Also, when you consider the fact that the bonus also relies on you having got the alliance with another city-state up to a level, or not with a city-state, sorry, you have to be the suzerain of the city-state, you have to have an alliance that's a certain level to take advantage of it, and you need to have theater squares with like good adjacency bonuses. That's like a lot of dependencies that kind of makes it a little bit hard to take advantage of this effect, in my opinion. Now, there are some civs that are good at taking advantage of this. Greece, for example, with the Acropolis, gets extra adjacency from having their acropolises next to their city center. Japan gets extra adjacency from having Japan gets the extra adjacency from all districts, I believe, and Brazil gets extra adjacency from rainforest. So these guys are going to have a little bit of an easier time getting the high theater square adjacency bonus, which means they're going to get more out of this than other civilizations. I would say it's not really a great bonus for actually helping you win the game. It's okay for a diplomacy victory because you're going to be wanting to have a lot of alliances in a diplomacy victory anyway, and it's worth it to build a few theater squares in a diplomacy victory because you typically want to rush your way through the civic tree down to the late game carbon recapture policy. As far as a cultural game goes, it's not really that useful as a suzerain bonus. It's still, I mean, like the extra culture from amphitheaters, archaeologicals, and the capital is nice, but it's just not really crazy. It's kind of okay for science victories. You know, it's just an okay bonus. It's like, that's what a 2 represents. Like, this is just okay. Like, 1 is like, this is like really, 1 is like, this is not very useful. Like, this isn't useful at all. 2 is like, this is okay. 3 is like, this is solid. 4 is like, this is really good. And 5 is like, this is incredible. So it's only like an okay bonus. It does, I don't think it's a game changer, but it's still good, right? So that's the way you should view this bonus. Anyway, that's all of the cultural city-states. So we're going to go ahead and just go back through them really quick. The 2 strongest are Antananarivo and Nan Madol. Then it's Kumasi. Then it is Rapa Nui with the Moai. And then finally it's Vilnius. Or penultimately, it's Vilnius, and then ultimately, it's Mohenjo-Daro with their really, really useless housing bonus from water. Next, we're going to go ahead and move on to industrial zones. Industrial city-states. Industrial city-states are a little bit less useful. Again, we've kind of talked about that. They're a little bit less useful than other city-states, but they still have their niche and their actual effects. Like the actual like industrial zone category or the industrial city-state category is really, really weak. But the actual effects that the industrial city-states provide are really, really powerful. So let's talk about Auckland here. So Auckland gives you shallow water tiles provide +1 production and an additional +1 production from the industrial era and beyond. So this is going to pair really well with any city, any civilization that likes to settle coastally or has a coastal bias. So for example, Indonesia, Australia. It also pairs especially well with Indonesia because they tend to build kampungs on the water. So that really works to give them a lot of production. This is easily either the top 1 or 2. I kind of went back and forth about whether Hong Kong was better or Auckland, but I think this one is just so flexible and so good that it's easily a 5 out of 5. It's good for science, it's good for domination, it's good for culture, it's good for religion, it's good for diplomacy. Anytime you are settling coastally, you want to be the suzerain of Auckland, or you want to have an economic alliance at least. Is it level 2 or level 3? I can't remember exactly what level it needs to be, but you want to have an economic alliance with someone who has Auckland. It's just that good. It's the tier 1 industrial city-state. The extra production is incredible. It's not game breaking, but it can be a huge difference. It can mean that you're making crazy amounts of food production and gold from your coastal cities, which usually would maybe struggle a little bit on the production side. And it just makes a huge difference. It can just make a huge difference for a coastal city, and that alone is enough to make it tier 1 in my opinion. Production is an incredibly flexible resource that you can put towards any of your games. So anything that just gives you raw production is just going to be good in any game. Next, we've got Brussels. Brussels bonus is plus 15% production towards wonders. This is a really kind of niche bonus, I would say. It's okay. It's essentially like having a second civic card that gives you a little bit of extra production. I don't think it's going to make... I don't think the bonus from Brussels is going to make or break. This should be Brussels, I think, actually. Gonna typo there. I don't think Brussels is going to make or break your game. I'd give it a solid 3 out of 5. It's good because there are wonders that can really help you win the game, but they're kind of few and far between, and a 15% production bonus isn't really that much. I mean, it can make the difference, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of, it's kind of just good. It's kind of just a good bonus that's a little bit inflexible that you can use in certain circumstances. I would say it's best for science, culture, and diplomatic victory types, but there are certain wonders that you're going to want to pick up. For example, in the diplomatic victory, there are some wonders that give you diplomatic victory points. In the cultural win, there are certain wonders with great work slots. There's certain wonders that give you bonuses towards great people, such as the Oracle, for example. Then there might be the Great Library, which has great work slots and gives you bonus great people points, all that sort of stuff. So I would say it's good for that. Then you have for science victories is sort of a similar thing. You can get stuff like trying to think now off the top of my head, stuff like the Colosseum could be useful for giving you lots of amenities and culture, so you don't have to build so many theater squares in your science games. That way you can work more campus research projects, all that sort of stuff. It has a little bit of synergy with France because they get tourism, extra tourism from their wonders. It also has a little bit of synergy from Sweden because their wonders get themed bonuses, eat more easily. And it also has a little bit of synergy with Egypt, who likes to build sphinxes and wonders in order to get the extra faith and culture. You could make an argument that there's a tiny little bit of synergy as well with China, but they don't really get more out of their wonders. They're just already good at building wonders, so I didn't really think it was worth like having that be like a defining characteristic of this. But yeah, it's just a solid, good suzerain bonus. Now we're going to go ahead and switch over to talk about Buenos Aires. This gives you +1 amenity per bonus resource type. That is pretty bad. That is a pretty weak bonus. Amenities, I've already given my opinion about amenities in Civ 6. Negative amenities don't really matter until you're at -5, and positive amenities don't really matter until you're at +5. So there's essentially a giant gap there where amenities are basically irrelevant to the outcome of the game. And that means unless these +1 amenities are like converting your entire empire over to having +3 amenities so that you get the 10% resource boost, it's not very good. It's just not very good. It's still okay, don't get me wrong. When I say it's not very good, I don't mean that it's weak. It's not that it's weak. It's just that it's like, it's always going to be good and helpful. It's just not very impactful. Like, it doesn't do a lot for you. And that's the main problem with this bonus. That's why I gave it a 2 out of 5. It's still useful. It's still good. It's just not like really that great. It's just kind of weak, right? It's going to mostly help you for a domination victory, in my opinion, where you are going to be suffering war exhaustion. You're going to have a lot of negative amenities, so this can help stave off that -5 threshold where things start to get really bad. So that's quite nice. Then we've got Cardiff. Cardiff is the joke industrial city-state. +2 power for every harbour building on paper is a cool idea. In practice, it is basically pointless. Doesn't really do a whole lot for you. First of all, powered buildings don't really come online until quite late into the game. So it loses a few points for that, in my opinion. Then you've also got the fact that power is quite easy to get where you need it anyway. So having a bunch of excess power doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, on one hand, it means in a very rare case, if you run into a situation where you can't build power plants, this is going to be useful, but it requires you to invest so heavily into the harbour district for what is arguably like a really meager and kind of weak bonus. It's not great. Let's be like, it's just not very useful. That's my big problem with it. So that's why I give it a 1 in every category. It's a 1 out of 5 in science, domination, culture, religion, and diplomatic victories. It does have use cases, don't get me wrong, but it's like so niche that it's practically useless, in my opinion. Victoria and Dido might be able to get a little bit more value out of it compared to other civilizations because of their unique harbour districts, but I don't know. It's just not super great. I mean, one fun thing is that if you get Suzerain of Cardiff really early in the game, you can have power in like the medieval era with like lighthouses and stuff. Like that's kind of cute. That's kind of cool. But it's just not very good. Next up, we've got Hong Kong. Hong Kong is, it is the contender for my number 1 spot in industrial city-states. Plus 20% production towards city projects is crazy good. This applies to your scientific district projects, like if you're trying to win the game, like the Mars expedition, the Earth satellite, the moon landing, and the exoplanet expedition. All of these things are going to be affected by that. Not only that, but if you're doing any sort of cultural or scientific rush game where you're pushing really, really hard, being able to work projects more efficiently means that more of your production is converted into great people points and or just raw science, culture, whatever. This is a really, 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 really flexible and powerful bonus. It's mostly going to help you if you're going for a science, culture, religion or diplomacy win. It's not so great for a domination win, but it can be nice if you need like a key great general out really early in the game and you manage to get suzerainty of Hong Kong. It can mean you get him a couple turns earlier. It's not great for domination, but in every other victory type it's super useful. You should absolutely, this is one of the big things that I've been learning lately that I haven't been doing for many games now. I haven't been doing it since essentially the launch of the game. Is I really have been undervaluing the power of those city-state or the city projects. They are so good. You should be doing them more. Next up, so that's a 4 out of 5, and across the board just like 4s and 5s. It's a really solid city-state. Next up, we've got Mexico City. Mexico City's bonus is the regional effects from your industrial zone and entertainment complexes reach 3 tiles farther. This is a solid suzerain bonus. It has a couple of points going against it. First of all, it requires you to build a certain type of infrastructure, and second of all, these types of infrastructure typically don't come online until the late game. However, when it does come online, it's quite handy. It means you'll have to build less of those kinds of infrastructure, and that you'll get more value out of those kinds of infrastructure that you do construct. Your factories will be more efficient, they'll reach further, they'll do more, and you won't have to build as many of them. Same with your zoos and your stadiums. It's just a really solid bonus that kind of does what it says on the tin. You don't need to do anything with it. It just helps in the late game. And it has, I would say it's just good across the board. I think the only victory type that it doesn't really help with is religion, because in religion, you're typically not really going to be building factories. You're going to kind of build up your holy sites and then just spam holy city projects until the end of the game in order to generate as much faith as possible to buy as many religious fighting units as possible. For diplomacy, it's really good for diplomacy, because the diplomatic victory, in my opinion, is sort of a victory type where you want to build as many industrial zones as possible to do the carbon recapture project in the late game to generate insane amounts of diplomatic favor in order to completely control the World Congress. So that's one way to use it. So I think it's pretty good for that in the late game. What else? Let's see. For culture victories, it's handy. You might build a few. Means you don't have to build as many factories. Again, it's just good across the victory types. It also has a little bit of synergy with Japan, whose unique factory works nicely with this, because the factory has extra culture when it spreads its regional bonus, which is nice. I'm pretty sure the cultural regional bonus spreads. I haven't played Japan in so long. I need to do a Japan game again soon. Also, England has a slightly better factory, so they'll get more value out of this too. All right, so that is all of the industrial city-states covered. Again, I want to talk about Auckland is easily my number 1 city-state here. It's a 5 out of 4. Then Hong Kong is my number 2. And then my number 3 is Brussels. These other 3 are just kind of a little bit weaker, especially Cardiff. They're still, like, Buenos Aires and Mexico are still solid, but Auckland and Hong Kong are my 2 like gold stars. All right, now we're going to talk about militaristic city-states. Starting off with, we have a COD. A COD gives you melee and anti-cavalry units do full damage to the city walls. Now, before I tell you this, I want you to write in the comments that username, that's your username, swear that I will never ever use this following information against PotatoMcWhiskey in an online multiplayer game. Signed, username, okay? So this bonus actually stacks with battering rams and siege towers. So that means if you have a CAD and a melee unit and a siege tower, you can literally one-shot cities like that. It is ridiculous. And you're not allowed to use this against me in multiplayer. I swear to God. You can practically one-shot a city with a melee or anti-cavalry unit if you have a COD and a battering ram. Now, do keep in mind that walls have been changed in the June update. The battering ram now only works against ancient walls, and the siege tower only works against ancient walls and medieval walls, and neither of them work against Renaissance walls. So this is a little bit harder to pull off the combo. However, this makes Akkad actually better, since Akkad is now the only way that you can do full damage to Renaissance walls with melee and anti-cavalry units, so it's pretty good. This is really great for any sort of aggressive early game civilization with unique melee or anti-cavalry units. So for example, Rome, the Congo, or not the Congo, the Congolese Empire, I don't know how to say it, the Zulu, Aztecs, anyone who has like an early game melee or anti-cavalry unit who wants to be attacking and aggressive is going to get great value out of Suzerainty of Akkad. And you can use that sort of a bit early game aggression to transition into other victory types. So that's why I give it a 4 out of 5. It is a solid, really good city-state bonus for any sort of aggressive civilization. Now, it's not going to be so great if you are not an aggressive civ, so take these scores with a pinch of salt. It's a 3, 4, 3, 3, 3, so it's just good, right? It's just always good because you can always do something aggressive in your games. However, do keep in mind that, you know, it requires you to be aggressive. Then we have Grenada here. Grenada's unique effect is the Alcazar unique tile improvement. It gives you +2 culture and science equal to 50% of the tile's appeal. And it's also a fort, which means you get +4 defense strength, and you automatically get 2 turns of fortification, which is a +6, which means you're getting a +10 total defensive strength while standing on this tile. And it can also provide you with tourism. This is a nice and solid bonus. It's really flexible. It can apply to many different games. For example, in a science game, not only does it give you science, it gives you culture, which is really good. I would give this a solid 3 out of 5. It's just a solid suzerain bonus. It's good for a domination victory, again, because it can give you culture and science, which means you don't have to build theater squares or campuses in order to fuel your tech economy. It's also really good for culture victories. I give it a 4 out of 5 because it can give you tourism. There's sometimes one of the hardest things to do is to find a way to convert your production into tourism when you're going for a culture victory, and so this just gives you another way to do that, to turn your production into builders, and then your builders build Alcazars, which will turn into tourism. Really nice. Then we've got, for religion victories, it's not very useful. And then again, it's just good for diplomacy victories because, again, it gives you science and culture, which means you can use your production in other areas of your empire rather than having to build those particular districts. Now, next we have Kabul. Kabul gives your units double experience from battles they initiate. This is, again, another one of these kind of flexible bonuses. I give it a 3 out of 5. It's just good. It's like a solid, good bonus, but it's mostly going to be useful when you're going for a domination victory. That's why for a domination victory it has a score of 4, but for every other victory type it's a score of 2. It's just not great for those other victories, but extra experience when you're on the aggression is really nice for domination victories, because typically in a domination victory you are going to be on the aggression. It's not so great on the defensive unless you're using ranged units to level up very quickly and defend yourself. So I'd say it's really good for domination victories. Otherwise it's just okay. Next up we've got Nazgarmu. I don't know if this has like special synergy with Sumeria, who shares experience with people who's his friends when they're mutually at war. Actually, that should be something worth testing. I don't know if that actually works. Next up, we've got Nazgarmu. Ngazargamu. I'm just going to call this Gazargamu. Land, combat, and support units are 20% cheaper to purchase with gold for each encampment district building in the city. This is really powerful. This is insane. So 20, because that 20% production applies to corps and armies. So you can get a 60% like discount on purchasing armies, which is insane. Easily a 5 out of 5 on this one. It's a 5 out of 5 for the suzerain bonus. It's mostly good for a domination victory. It has some applications in science and diplomacy if you're going conquering. Although, you know, going conquering in a diplomacy victory is a little bit of a dangerous thing in of itself because you might turn everyone against you. Same reason for culture victories, but just in general, it's really, really good. It also has some synergy with the Mali and the democracy government, I believe, which democracy government makes purchases cheaper, as does the Mali's unique district, the Seguba. So it has some synergies as well. It's a really, really solid, really, really fun Suzerain bonus to take advantage of, and you will be able to crank out super cheap, super powerful armies really fast. Next up, we've got Preslav in the militaristic city-state category. This is the military city-state version of a joke. +2 loyalty per turn in cities for each encampment district building is a joke. It's not very useful. It's not very good. It's only defensive loyalty. There's some very, very niche cases where it's like marginally useful. So for example, if you're conquering an enemy city and you have a lot of grievances against them, and they have fully built encampment districts, you can kind of maybe save yourself a little bit of loyalty pressure and like headache using this, but it's just not very good. One thing, I don't know. It kind of like it feels like it's supposed to be designed around being something you use to defend against loyalty pressure on the periphery of your empire or something, but it just kind of ends up failing to really accomplish that goal, and it just ends up being practically useless in all categories. I'd give it a 1 out of 5 in every category: science, domination, culture, religion, diplomacy. It's just kind of useless. Next up, we've got Valletta. Valletta is one of the more powerful militaristic city-states because it allows you to change how you play the game, which is always going to be sort of a higher tier in my opinion. So Valletta's bonus is that city center buildings and encampment buildings can be bought with faith. And not only that, but walls are cheaper to purchase. Walls are a city center building, so that means you can purchase walls with this bonus. This is really, really cool because if you have Valletta as if you are a Suzerain of Valletta, you can kind of be a bit lax about building your walls and then just kind of quickly purchase them when any potential aggression appears. Now, I give it a 4 out of 5, right? So that's like a solid, strong Suzerain bonus. Mostly it's useful, in my opinion, for culture victories. That's why I gave it a 5 out of 5, because in culture victories, one of the hurdles you're going to want to try to figure out is how to convert your faith into tourism, and this gives you an avenue for that. One thing to remember is that walls in your cities after the conservation civic produce tourism based on their level. So ancient walls will produce 1 tourism, medieval walls will produce 2 tourism, and Renaissance walls will produce 3 tourism. This means this is a really, really good way to turn your faith directly into tourism before you're actually able to turn it into tourism in the form of naturalists or rock bands. So it gives you a way to sort of pre-build some late game tourism into your civilization. So that's why I really like this one for tourism victories. It's pretty good for domination and other victory types as well, just because you can convert your fate into defensive resources. Like if you're going on the aggression, what you can do, you take over a city, you quickly buy walls in that city, and then all of a sudden you have another unit shot that you can use to help clear out that city and move on to the next one. And it also protects it from being retaken. It's just a nice bonus. It's really, really solid, really, really flexible, and it applies to a multitude of situations. And it actually applies, in my opinion, most strongly to the win condition that you would not think is kind of going in hand with a militaristic city-state, and that is tourism. So that's all of the militaristic city-states covered in my so far. I think the standout winners here are Gazar Garmu with the cheaper purchasing. Honorable mention for Akkad for basically changing the interaction between melee units and walls, and also the bonus for Valletta, which allows you to change how you play the game. I think they are, overall, I think the militaristic city-states are in a really good spot, with the exception of Preslav. I think they're a little weak, and I'd like to maybe see them changed. Next up, we have the religious city-states. Religious city-states are a bit of a mixed bag, in my opinion. Some of them are kind of like pretty weak. Some of them are kind of eh. So let's talk about Armagh. Armagh is... Well, Armagh gives you the monastery unique tile improvement. This gives you +2 faith and +15 healing for religious units. It also gives you +1 faith for every 2 adjacent districts, and +1 housing, and an additional +1 housing at colonialism. This feels like a fairly weak, unique tile improvement in my opinion. It only really gives you faith, so it's only really useful in a religion victory. I don't think I would ever really build this in another victory type. However, the extra faith and housing can situationally be useful. So that's why I gave it a score of 2 across the board. And then in every victory, except for religion victory, I gave it a 2 out of 5. For the religion victory, I gave it a 4 out of 5, because oftentimes in a religion victory, what you're trying to do is to figure out how efficiently to turn your production into faith. And if you can build builders to build monasteries, that's a way to turn your production into faith, which is really, really nice. It'll also give you extra housing, which means you can turn your food into more population, and you can turn more population into more faith production, and so on. Really solid for a religion victory. Not so useful for every other kind. Next up, we've got Jerusalem. This one is a little bit flexible. Basically, what it does is it gives all of your cities with holy sites exert their pressure as if they were holy cities. That means they give 4x pressure within 10 tiles. So the standard holy site pressure, I believe, is 2. I believe the standard religious pressure is 1, and then the holy site pressure is 2, and then the holy city pressure is 8. Now, this does mean so a lot of people think of this as an offensive religious bonus. I think this is more of a defensive religious bonus. This is the city-state that you want to find if you are planning on creating a religion but not spreading it, at least not really too far outside your borders. What this means is you can, for example, dip into a religion with a couple of holy sites, and then not have to really focus on generating a faith in order to defend it, because your couple of cities will be producing holy site pressure as if they were holy cities anyway. So that it's just really, really nice for being able to keep your religion after you get it. It's not so great for actually spreading your religion, in my opinion. However, it's still kind of nice and flexible and useful, so I gave it a 2 out of 5. I don't think it deserves a 1, even though in most victory conditions it's not really going to help you win the game, so I gave it a 1 in everything except for religion, where every little bit of religious pressure actually does count for quite a bit, so I think it has a little bit more useful there, and also it's just like a religious city-state, so it gives you faith, so I guess, just kind of give it that nice little bit of value. Next up, we have Candy. Candy gives you a free relic every time you discover a new natural wonder. It also gives you plus 50% faith from relics. This is a solid city-state. If you find this early and get early suzerainty, you can pick up 4, 5, maybe 6 relics throughout the game, which is really, really nice, because that's going to give you lots of faith production and also potentially some tourism production, although it is religious tourism, which is the weakest kind of tourism. I rate it a 2 out of 5. 2 is like, it's still good, but it's not really that great. It's just kind of okay. For a religion victory, situationally, this can be incredible, don't get me wrong, but it's just a little bit too inconsistent and not really game-changing reliably. But it can be game-changing, and it can be incredible fun. That's why I gave it a 5 out of 5 on the fun category rating. But otherwise, it's not really going to help you actually win the game for science, domination, culture, or diplomacy, but it will actually help you win the game in a religion game. It has especially good synergy with the Khmer, who can really, really crank out as many relics as they want, and it has a little bit of extra synergy with Poland and the Congolese Empire, because they can often get extra value out of relics anyway, so they're going to want to hunt for those. All right. Next up, we've got La Venta. La Venta gives you the Colossal Head unique tile improvement. This gives you plus 2 faith and plus 1 faith for every 2 adjacent rainforest or woods. It also gives you plus 1 faith for every adjacent rainforest and or woods at humanism. And it also generates tourism from faith at flight. This is one of the stronger city-states. I kind of debated about whether I would give it a 3 or a 4. I left it at the 3 mark. 3 I think is a fair score for this. It's not so useful for science, domination, or diplomacy victories, but it really shines in culture and religion games, because it gives you a way to not only it gives you a way to convert your faith into your production into faith, which is something you want in both tourism and religious games, and it also gives you a way to turn your faith into tourism and your production into tourism, which is really, really useful for a cultural game. So I'd give this it's a really, really solid, it's a really, really good tile improvement. So it's very good. I'm really tempted to give it a 4 out of 5, but I left it at the 3. It's also important to remember that you can actually build the colossal heads on Tundra, and that means with Russia's Faith Tundra bonus, you actually get extra tourism from these as Russia. So that's something worth keeping in mind. If you're ever knocking around Russia and you're wondering, how do I get extra faith? Look for Venta and get those colossal heads. Next up, we've got Nazca. This is easily one of my favorite city-states in the game, purely because the Nazca line is so fun to use. The Nazca line is a unique tile improvement that gives you +1 faith to all adjacent tiles. However, you can't actually work the Nazca line, so you can't like have a bunch of Nazca lines overlapping with each other and then working them. You have to work the tiles. You can't actually work the tile that the Nazca line is on, which is a very interesting gameplay mechanic in my opinion. Now, it also gives +1 faith to tiles with a resource that are adjacent to them. So if you place this on a tile, it'll give +1 faith to the tile, and then if there's something like wheat on it, it'll give it another +1 faith. It also gives +1 food to adjacent desert tiles. That includes flatland, desert, and desert hills after you have researched civil service. You also get +1 production to all adjacent flat tiles after you've researched mass production, which is a really nice solid bonus for this. It's a really fun, really rewarding, unique tile improvement that has applications across any sort of a game. For example, so I would give this a 4 out of 5 on the scoring scale. It's above average, it's good, it's solid, it's a lot of fun to use. It also gives you, I'd give it a 3 across the board, and then an extra 4 out of 5 in the religion victory, because it's useful in any victory type, because faith, food, and production are all really useful resources. But the faith is most useful in a religion victory. It also is quite good for civs that have a desert start bias. For example, the Mali or I believe Arabia have a desert start bias. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is a little bit better for civs that have a desert start bias, because if you find Nazca early and get suzerainty to them, you can actually turn your desert cities into really nice powerhouses. We also have, next up, we have Yerevan. Yerevan is easily the cream of the crop, the numero uno of the religious city-states. This is the best of the gang. What is their bonus? Their bonus is that apostle units can choose from any possible promotion. This is so incredibly powerful. The difference between randomly getting promotions and being able to choose any possible promotion is strong enough that I would suggest that you wait before you buy any apostles and spread your religion in a game until you can get suzerainty of Yerevan. It's that important. It's that powerful. Some of the apostle promotions literally can, like in certain combinations, I believe it's Proselytizer and the triple strength one, can literally single-handedly flip a city every turn. And it is ridiculous. You combine that with some extra spreads, for example, from a golden age or from a mosque building, you can get apostles that are insane. It is ridiculous for a religion victory, and it is the tier 1 numero uno cream of the crop city-state that you are going to want to be hunting for if you're going for any kind of religious game. In fact, even if you're not a religious civ and you find Yerevan early into the game, it's perfectly viable to just transition into a religion game, get suzerainty of them, and then try to convert the world. It's that good, especially when you consider that you can combine this with Moksha, for example, which allows you to pick 2 of the promotions, which gets ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And then if you consider, if you're playing if you manage to get the Mont Saint Michel wonder, which gives you martyr on all of your apostles, that it can, now you have triple promoted apostles who also generate relics when they die, and then they can spread, and it just starts to get absolutely ridiculous. It's easily the most fun, most powerful, and most interesting suzerain bonus in the religious category. That's why it gets a 5 out of 5. It's not very useful. I will concede, it's not very useful for a science game. It's not very useful for a domination game. It's marginally useful in a culture game, and it's not very useful for a diplomacy game. It's kind of marginally useful in a culture game because it gives you a way to turn your faith into tourism. However, I believe there are way more efficient ways to turn your faith into tourism, namely in the form of rock bands and in the form of Valletta faith purchasing walls, or potentially even just building naturalists to make national parks. So I think on the whole, this is like super, super powerful, but it's really, really focused on just winning a religious victory. So I think overall, I think my cream of the crop here are Yerevan and Nazca. These are the most fun to use. However, I think if you are going for a religious or tourism victory, La Venta is something you should definitely check out and keep in mind. So next up, we have got our scientific city-states. Starting off with Babylon. Babylon is so damn good. Okay. Babylon gives you +2 science from great works of writing and +1 science from relics and artifacts. That is a crazy good bonus, especially if you're going for some sort of tourism victory. It is still useful if you're going for a science victory, because it allows you to turn your production into science through these sort of indirect means of building theater squares, which you are going to want anyway if you're going for a science victory, because you want to get through the civic tree faster in order to get the high tier science multiplier cards. So this is really good for that. It's just really, really fun to use. It's really, really great. I would give it a 4 out of 5 on the ranking list, and the only reason it doesn't get a 5 out of 5 is because Geneva exists, and it is just that much better. So if you're going for a science victory, this is a 4 out of 5. If you're going for a culture victory, this is a 5 out of 5. If you're going for a diplomacy victory, it's pretty good. Any other victory type, it's kind of just You know, if you're going for a religion victory, you might end up with some relics, so you'll get a little bit of extra science out of it. If you're going for a domination victory, you might conquer some great works and end up with a little bit of extra science out of it. It's good in most cases, but it really, really shines in the science and cultural win conditions. Also, the Maori can't make use of the great works of writing bonus, so just keep that in mind when you are going to get Suzerainty of Babylon when you're playing the Maori. I think in one of my Maori games I did get Suzerainty of the Babylon and I was a little bit miffed that I didn't get any great writer works. Alrighty, so next up we have Bologna. Bologna gives you districts with a building provide +1 great person point of their type. So what this means is if you have a campus with a library, you will get +1 great scientist point. Now, for theater squares, if you have an amphitheater, you will get all 3. You will get a great writer point, a great artist point, and a great musician point. I have great musician. Let me see if I can fix that. You get a great musician point. This is easily a 4 out of 5 for me. It's really, really strong. It's 4 across the board because extra great people points applies to any victory type, and it's just always going to be useful. Extra great people points applies to every victory type, so this is just always going to be useful. I said that twice because it deserves being said twice. This is just a really, really good city-state. Arguably another contender for the top spot of the scientific city-state suzerainty bonuses. I did, however, knock it down a point just because I felt like Geneva is just that good. It's just that good. Something to keep in mind, though, with this city-state is that the Congo will get a 50% multiplier to any of the great points generated by this. I think it's only for certain great people because the Congo has a 50% great people point generation for great merchants, artists, musicians, and so on. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I know that the Congo gets extra value out of Bologna. We're also going to go ahead and move on and talk about Fez. Fez is what I would call sort of a middle of the pack situational city-state bonus. It gives you +20 science per population of the city that you convert for the first time. So what does that mean? If you have a city with 10 population and it is the very first time that you convert it and you use a religious unit to convert it, it does not work for passive conversion, I believe. You have to actually convert that city directly with a unit action. You will get 200 science from that 10 population city. This is quite nice. It's kind of a bit of a convoluted way to get science. It can work in certain victory types, but it kind of has a lot of dependencies. It requires you to have, a religion. It requires you to have a faith income. And then it also requires you to have a faith income and actually care about science, because most of the time, if you have a faith income, you actually don't care about science. If you have a faith income, you're trying to win the game through religion or for tourism, so you only need a certain amount of science. Now, where I think it is actually kind of most practically useful is if you were going for a culture game where you went for a religion early, and then you're transitioning out of that religion into tourism. You can kind of push your way through the tech tree to get to a certain point. It also shines if you're going for a religious science game where you found a religion early game in a early in the game and then transition into earning a lot of science. It can work there too. It's a flexible and interesting bonus, and most importantly, it's a flexible and interesting bonus that changes how you play the game, which makes the game more interesting in my opinion. So it is a very, very fun bonus to play with. One thing to note is that Spain gets stronger inquisitors with more charges, I believe. I can't remember that off the top of my head, but I know for a fact that Spain can get great value out of this if they're going for any sort of faith/domination game. They can do a good mixture of both, so keep that in mind. If there's a Fez in your game, which is kind of appropriate because I believe Fez is in Morocco, which is a place that Spain attacked and or conquered at some point in history, so it's kind of funny that they have good synergy. And it also kind of works well with Arabia if you are going for any sort of a domination-y spree with an edge of science on it, because Arabia has... Wait, why is it good with Arabia? I don't remember, because Arabia has like... Arabia can get a religion without really trying. So you can kind of go for a domination victory and then spread your religion behind it. So that'll get you a lot of science to get you ahead. I think that was the logic there. So yeah, it's just a solid 3 out of 5, really good suzerain bonus. Next up, we're going to go ahead and talk about Geneva. Geneva gives you plus 15% science whenever you are not at war with any civilization. Now, I believe, I can't remember off the top of my head, I don't think this is a plus 15% science multiplier that applies after other multipliers. I think this is the one that applies with other multipliers, so it's not as strong as, say, the late game multiplier cards, but it's still pretty good. I would easily give it a 5 out of 5. It is the tier 1 scientific city-state because it just gives you a lot of a resource and requires you to not really do much other than be suzerain to get those resources and not be at war. It's a little bit weaker in multiplayer because if somebody sees you're suzerain of Geneva, they can just declare war on you and you lose 15% science and then you're very sad. But other than that, it's really good. I would give it a 5 out of 5 in a scientific victory, a 2 out of 5 in a domination, a 4 out of 5 in a culture victory because you're often going to want a lot of science if you're going for a culture victory, just so you can get some of those late game multipliers to tourism. For example, at computers, I believe there's a 25% tourism boost, and you can also pick up the broadcast center early, and then there's some other stuff that'll give you boosted tourism in the late game. There's also a religion category here where it's got a 1 out of 5, and that is because it is not very useful for getting a religion victory. Science does not matter if you are going for a religion victory. It can be quite helpful if you're going for a diplomatic victory, but it's not really a direct thing that's going to completely win the game for you. It's just helpful and nice. Next up, the reason it's only a 2 out of 5 in domination is because, well, obviously you're going to be at war all the time, and that doesn't really work with the whole thing there. Next up, we've got Hattusa, which gives you +2 of each strategic resource per turn that you have revealed but not improved. So that means, for example, if you have revealed uranium but have not improved it, you will get +2 uranium from Hattusa's suzerain bonus. This is a pretty weak bonus in my opinion. It's not completely useless. There are edge cases where you're going to run into where you don't have any resources and you need a resource, and this is going to help you out of it. But it's just a little bit unreliable. It's not very powerful. It's not very good. I don't think this is a very interesting or fun bonus to have and interact with. I just think it's kind of weak. It's just weak. It's helpful in very, very niche circumstances, but those circumstances are so niche and so varied and far apart, and the impact that it has is so low that I don't think it really deserves anything more than a 2 out of 5. However, if you thought that was bad, just wait until I talk about Palanque. Oh my god, Palanque is the absolute dog poo tier of the scientific city-states. 15% growth is negligible. It is nothing. It is a few turns shaved off the total population of a city's growing time throughout the game. It is really not that good. It is just weak. It is 1 out of 5. It's not very useful. First of all, you have to be the citizen of the city. You have to have built a campus in the city that you want to take advantage of this bonus. That city has to have room to grow. That city has to have a surplus of food to grow, but not too much of a surplus of food so that the 15% matters. Otherwise, if the city has a whole huge surplus of food, the 15% growth rate doesn't matter. So it's kind of like, it's really applicable to civs with housing bonuses, like for example, the Incas or the Khmer. But other than that, it's just kind of weak. It's kind of weak. Really, I feel like the three winners here are Geneva with the 15% science whenever you're not at war, Babylon with the +2 science from great works of writing and the +1 science from relics and artifacts, and Bologna with the extra great people points. These are the three that if I saw them in my games, I would want to be suzerain of them every single time, without fail. Unless I was going for a domination victory, in which I would kind of think about it, with the exception of Bologna. I think they're really, 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 really solid suzerains. Suzerainty bonuses. All right, finally, oh my god, it's an hour and 10 minutes we've been talking here. This is actually really tough to kind of keep up the energy for an hour and 10 minutes, especially after I spent 4 hours recording and researching for this stream. All right, next up we've got the trade city-states. Now, trade city-states are interesting. They're interesting because gold is really, really powerful, but the suzerain bonuses are crap. Like, the suzerain bonuses are legitimately awful. So we're going to go through them pretty quick because they're all equally bad, with the exception of Cahokia and Zanzibar. All right, so let's talk about Antioch. Trade routes to foreign cities earn +1 gold for each luxury resource at the destination. This is crap. This is really bad. This is not great. I don't know, like, I could continue to describe how not useful this is for hours. Typically, a city isn't going to have more than 1 to 3 luxuries improved at most. So this is 1 to 3 gold on some of your trade routes. This is not really very good. There is one civ who, me and my chat, we chat over on twitch.tv/PotatoMcWhiskey. We tried to come up with a civ that has like some kind of synergy. And it turns out that Egypt prefers foreign trade routes. That's the synergy. Sometimes Egypt likes to send their trade routes outside of their own civilization, and they might incidentally take advantage of Antioch's extra gold from luxuries at the destination of the trade route. It is not going to help you win. Trade city-states are still really, really valuable because they give you lots of gold, but they're just not good. Their bonuses are awful. Next up, we've got Bandar Brunei. Bandar Brunei is another practically useless city-state. Trading posts in foreign cities provide +1 gold to your trade routes passing through or going to that city. This is not good. This is just not very useful. For both of these, I see what they were going for, but I don't think it really captures that feeling. If you really hardcore play around this, you can end up with a bonus of like 5 or 6 gold on your trade routes in the late game. However, it requires an awful lot of setup, and often it requires you to do really suboptimal trade routes for a very long period of time in order to get a very measly boost to the amount of gold that you are getting from those trade routes. It is not very good. 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5, just not good. Next up, we've got Cahokia. Cahokia gives you access to the Cahokia Mound unique tile improvement. This gives you +3 gold and +1 amenity. It also gives you +1 amenity if you have a second Cahokia Mound in the city once you have researched natural history. Wait, I misspelled this. Mound. It also gives you +1 food for every 2 adjacent districts once you have feudalism, and +1 food for every adjacent district at replaceable parts. It also gives you +1 housing and +1 housing at cultural heritage. It is a mixed bag. It is a mixed bag of bonuses, and oddly, it is the strongest of the bunch, or arguably second strongest or first strongest. I give it a 4 out of 5. This is a solid tile improvement. It's very complicated. It's very hard to figure out. Basically, build 2 of them in every city and then forget they exist, and they'll help you. Amenities, housing, food, and gold, all really solid things that can apply to any victory type. So it's just a solid 3 across the board. Very nice. It is a nice tile improvement. It's not a game changer. It's just nice. Next up, we've got Lisbon. Lisbon is dog doo-doo. Trade units are immune to being plundered on water tiles. This is essentially worthless, useless, pointless, and does nothing except very occasionally save you from your own bad gameplay. This sort of reminds me of Mohenjo-Daro, which really only helps you if you're playing poorly anyway. If your trade units are getting pillaged, you're playing badly. Cue like everyone in the comments linking every time one of my trade routes has been pillaged in water because I didn't have suzerainty to Lisbon. Listen, it's not very useful. It's not very good. It's not one to, like, again, if I had a choice between this bonus and any other bonus and I had water, I would just take this because it's like, okay, I guess I don't have to delay or I don't have to defend my trade units. It's still just not very good. It's just not good. It doesn't help you win the game. It just kind of prevents you from being wrecked by your own badness. Next up, we have Muscat, finally a city-state with an actual bonus. This gives you +1 amenity in cities with a commercial hub district. This is solid. This is good. This is strong even, in fact. You could easily argue me up to a 4 out of 5 on this. I gave it a 3 out of 5, but a 4 out of 5 in domination victories, because often in domination victories, the cities that you are conquering have commercial hubs, which means you're going to be getting more amenities in your commercial hubs, which means you're less likely to deal with the war weariness penalties and the negative amenity problems that can come along with going on a long domination victory. It is good. It's solid. It's not amazing. It's just good. And when you look at the other options in the trade tree, my word, it looks even better. Next up, we've got a sort of variation on Muscat. That is Zanzibar. It gives you the cinnamon and cloves luxury resource, which give you +6 amenities each. This is a really nice bonus. Easily, probably second best of the group. That's a total of 12 amenities across 12 cities, or 2 amenities per cities in a 6-city empire. This is really solid. I'll give it a 4 out of 5 and a 3 out of most city categories and a 4 out of most others. I just want to point out that any of these bonuses that give amenities are going to help Scotland more. I think there was another amenity bonus up here somewhere that I can't remember. Yeah, it was up here. Buenos Aires gives you Scotland amenities. Scotland gets bonus stuff from amenities. It's still not amazing. It's still not great. This is just a decent bonus. Like, it's a good bonus. If you were given a choice between all of the city-states here and Zanzibar, you would pick Zanzibar because it's just the one that's actually like useful. So, for example, for Muscat to give you more amenities than Zanzibar, you have to have 13 cities, all with fully built commercial hubs. So Zanzibar is just a really solid choice. You can also sell it and give it away, those strategics, I believe, although I could be wrong about that. I could be very wrong about that. Yeah, it's just good. I've never actually went to sell them, so I could be really wrong about that. 6 amenities twice is really good. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole tier list. That is everything I can possibly think of for an hour and 17 minutes. Really quick. Really quick, we're going to go ahead and do the bonus content. So just for fun, me and my chat over on twitch.tv/PotatoMcWhiskey, we created the Tortuga Trade City-State, which has the unique bonus that allows you to pillage other players' trade routes with naval raider class units on water, even if you were at peace. And we gave it a 5 out of 5 in every category with the special notes of memes. This would be a really fun city-state that I would like to see a modder maybe implement, or someone. I think it would be a lot of fun to take advantage of this, although perhaps the AI would struggle of truly taking advantage of this. It would be really, really cool though. As for the actual bonus content here, we basically went through and talked about some of the really weak city-states and how they could be improved. We came up with an idea for the weakest city-states in each category, with the exception of religious city-states, because they all seem actually pretty fine. But for example, Mohenjo-Daro, we did a bit of research on Mohenjo-Daro, and apparently in Mohenjo-Daro there was a great granary. So we came up with the idea that if you're Suzerain of Mohenjo-Daro, your granaries would give you +1 culture and +1 food. I think that's like not a crazy good bonus, but it's a solid bonus and it fits the theme of Mohenjo-Daro's history. So I think that would be a cool way to bring Mohenjo-Daro up from being really, really weak to being, just solid and decent. Then for Vilnius, we found that, you know, maybe a way to make it just that little bit better was if it gave you half a point of alliance per turn with your allies, which would mean your alliances would not only give you more from your theater squares, but they would level up faster. That would be really cool. Then we have Buenos Aires. Instead of giving bonus resources plus one amenity per type, what if they gave also additionally to that a minor adjacency bonus to all districts? This isn't something you're really going to play around, but if you built your empire and you kind of have a few resources around, you're going to get a few extra bits of science, culture, gold, whatever, depending on how your resources play out. So it's not something you're really going to play around, but it's kind of like a weaker bonus of the Hansa bonus to local resources for every district, which I think would be fun. It would be cool. And I think it would really bring it up from being a sort of weak city-state to being a really, really good city-state. Next up, we've got Cardiff, which is cities receive +2 power for every harbour building. I think it would be interesting if unused local power sources were converted to gold at a 1-to-1 ratio. So that means if you have 6 power in a city that is not generated from a fuel conversion, that 6 power would become 6 gold. This, I think, would elevate this bonus from being useless to being interesting and worth pursuing and even playing around. Then we got Preslav. I think the major thing we said is that the +2 loyalty per turn in cities with encampment district buildings should beat loyalty pressure instead of loyalty, so that you can actually build a ton of encampment buildings on someone's border and then pressure down their cities using your encampment buildings. That would be really interesting and a lot of fun, and far more interesting than the current iteration, in my opinion, especially since it would mean if you had a ton of encampments around, all of your cities would loyalty reinforce each other and make it very hard for someone to break you from a loyalty perspective. The other one that we said was Hattusa. Instead of giving you +2 of each strategic resource per turn that you have revealed but not improved, it should be just +2 for each strategic resource that you have revealed. I think that would be far better and far more interesting than the not improved version. Palanque is easily the weakest scientific city-state, so I would really like to see sort of reinforcing its theme by giving you +1 food from campus specialists. I think this would be a way to change how players play the game. They would work much more of these because they would be more easily able to feed their cities, and I think that would make Palanque easily a tier 1, tier 2 city-state that people would fight over in multiplayer and single player, and it would be a lot of fun too to be able to kind of bring back that nod from Civ 5 where you get food from specialists. For Antioch and Bandar Brunei, I think these bonuses are like just always going to be weak, so you know, I couldn't really think of anything to improve them other than just giving them extra gold. And the same sort of thing for Lisbon. I think maybe just a really simple way to buff this and make this a little bit more attractive for players would be to give it +1 gold for every X tiles of water in the route, where X is some value decided upon and balanced by the developers. But yeah, that's the Pantheon tier list. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. That is everything. We have talked about all of the or not Pantheon tier list. That is the city-state tier list. We have talked about every single city-state in the game in detail, and we have talked about their bonuses, which victory types they're good for, how fun they are, which city-states you want to meet first, which civs have special synergies with these. I want to let you guys know. Please remember, if you think I missed any information or you would like to have a bit of input in what would go to a future version of this, go ahead and leave a comment with some idea or thought of yours that you think is worth mentioning that I missed. Other than that, I want to say I love you all so much for watching this video. And if you watch this video until the end, if you go through and watch this video and make detailed timestamps, the person who does it first and the fastest and the best will get a free copy of Civilization 6. Whether or not that you already own the game, you can get one of the expansions, you can get Rise and Fall, Gathering Storm, or the base game, whichever one you want. So whoever watched to the end and does that, I love you all very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.